Hello everyone and welcome to yet another couchless video. Now I know I still owe you the story behind the last time the couch disappeared, and we will get to that. It's really not my fault the couch isn't here and that I'm still late with the story. It's coming anytime now, so be ready for it. But getting back to this game, we are still at the 1916 Rice tournament in New York. We've skipped a few rounds. We said we will not be covering all of them, but Capablanca is 6-6, so 6 wins in a row, and here he faces a very strong American chess master, Jacob Bernstein, not to be mistaken with Joseph Bernstein, Capablanca's old nemesis from the San Sebastian tournament of 1911, who protested about Capablanca even participating, as he hasn't really qualified in any big international tournament. This is a different gentleman. He's been New York champion 3 years in a row, and as you'll see in this game, he is quite a strong player, and well, it's better just to show you the game. So without further ado, no, not without further ado, as I really thought I will not be able to find a photo of Mr. Jacob Bernstein, but to my delight, I was able to find, and it's really an amazing photo. I really want to show it to you. It's from 1915, so it was taken a year before this tournament was played, also in New York, and a lot of similar faces will be in it. So here it is. I do hope you enjoy it. There it is. In the front, you can see Capablanca facing Edward Lasker, and the table next to them is Jacob Bernstein facing none other than Frank James Marshall. And a lot of interesting faces in the background. And not all of them were identified to date, but I've found a link to Chess History website. I will put a link to it in the description below, so you can check it out. It will be the first thing you see if you want to learn more about this photo and about all the nice people in it. So getting back to the game, Jacob Bernstein has the white pieces, and he opens with e4. We have e5 by Capablanca, knight to f3, knight to c6, and now knight to c3. So deviating a bit from the Ruy Lopez, we have the 3 knights game, but Capablanca goes knight f6, so it's the 4 knights game. We have bishop to b5, just going for a nice Spanish variation, and bishop to b4. We have the symmetrical variation. Both players castle. Here we have Bernstein castles, Capablanca castles, and now d3. Capablanca goes d6, continues the symmetry, and here bishop to g5. And here one other example where it's impossible to keep the symmetry going forever. Here if black goes bishop to g4, it's just better for white. Just bishop captures. And now if queen captures, knight d5 wins the game. Because after the queen moves, you just remove the defender of the bishop on b4, captures, and now white will be up a piece. Or in a different matter, if you play bishop captures on f6, black can also play bishop captures on f3, but now just queen captures, queen captures, queen captures, g captures, and again, bishop to d5 threatens the same idea, winning the bishop on b4 as you're threatening to remove the defender, but you're definitely winning at least the f6 pawn. You will gain material, you will have a better position. So one nice example of when it's again impossible to keep the symmetry going. So here we have bishop captures on c3. Capablanca decides to give up the bishop pair, but he will get some nice counterplay in return. So b captures on c3, and now queen to e7. Bernstein continues developing pieces. We have rook to e1. The rook now defends the e4 pawn, and white is preparing d4. We have knight to d8 by Capablanca. Doesn't allow white to double up Capablanca's pawns, and he also is preparing to remaneuver the knight into the center, and depend on what white plays, maybe go for the f4 square, or maybe just attack the bishop, go for some other squares. But white continues with his plan. We have d4 as the e4 pawn is protected, and now bishop to g4 by Capablanca, pinning the knight. And here white decides that, okay, the bishop no longer has any future here. Bishop to f1, just tucks that bishop in for later. It's a nice defensive piece, doesn't allow black to develop any sort of pawn storm by attacking the bishop, and also it could be a nice defensive piece, and he will be able to use it later. Knight to e6 by Capablanca, now strengthening the d4 square, but also attacking the bishop here. And here Bernstein tucks away the dark square bishop as well. Bishop to c1, so we have the bishops on starting squares. But of course, it's still a bishop pair. If you're able to develop them later, it will still be a great advantage. And here Capablanca plays a very nice move. Bishop captures on f3, and he gives white a choice. Do you want to play queen captures on f3 and allow e captures on d4, where you would just lose a very nice pawn. You could go bishop to b2 here, you could go rook here. Well, not so great is captures and allowing this knight to come to d4 while attacking the queen. But queen captures on f3 is the safest choice for white. But Bernstein wants to keep everything together. He wants a monster center, as you can see here. He wants to keep his bishop pair, and sometimes, well, especially in chess, you can't always have everything. So knight to h5 by Capablanca. He goes for this very nice f4 square, and also he's threatening some very nice ideas. First, bishop to h3 by white, and now the knight comes to f4. And here, if you're not careful, well, you could easily suffer ideas like queen to g5 check. So here we have bishop to g4, trying to block everything, and the bishop was under attack on h3, and now just h5 by Capablanca, forcing Bernstein to capture on e6. We have bishop captures on e6, f captures on e6, now opening the f file for the rook, and now king to h1, a very important move. If you play a slow move like rook b1, just queen g5 check leads to checkmate. King f1, queen g2 will be checkmate, the knight covers the e2 square. So after f captures on e6, king h1, at least now queen g5 doesn't come with check. So knight to h3. Now Capablanca is threatening knight captures on f2, which will give check and win the queen on d1. So bishop to e3, Bernstein defends the f2 pawn, and now queen to h4, just bringing the queen into the game, piling up on the f2 pawn. The idea is rook f7, bring the other rook to f8, double up rooks along the f file. It's a very unpleasant position for white, but you know, white tried to keep everything together, and it's very hard to do that. Queen to e2, defending twice the f2 pawn, and Capablanca just plays rook to f7. He's preparing to double up on the f8, on the f file, and white doesn't really have any active moves here. Yes, he does have the monster center here, as you can see, this house basically of pawns in the center of the board, but he doesn't have an active move. So here he finds the only active move he has, but he has to give up some material. Rook to g1. He offers Capablanca the exchange, but at least he will be able to activate the rook, along the g file. Capablanca gladly accepts this. We have knight captures on g1, rook captures on g1, and now just queen back to f6. Piling up on the f3 pawn, and also not allowing any sneaky ideas like bishop to h6, but it's just a very powerful position for Capablanca. Rook to g3, now defending the f3 pawn, and here we have e captures on d4 by Capablanca. Bishop captures, and now comes e5, pushing the bishop back. Bishop goes back to e3, and now queen to e6. Capablanca here plans a very devious idea, but you will see that very soon. Here we have bishop to g5 by white, going after the h5 pawn, and Capablanca just doubles rooks on the f file. So what do you do here? Well, you are kind of threatening the g7 pawn, so here queen to f1, preparing queen g1 to put at least some pressure along the g file, as Capablanca will definitely capture on f3. So Capablanca does this. We have rook captures on f3, queen to g1, now putting some pressure along the g file. Also, the threat is rook captures on h5. So what do you do here? First, Capablanca defends the g7 pawn once. We have rook 8 to f7, defending the pawn, and now comes rook captures on h5. So it's a very interesting position, a very dynamic position. Bernstein sacrificed the exchange to gain some counterplay. How do you continue this game with the black pieces? Now, there are a lot of ways you can continue this, but the way Capablanca played it is just, it's just art. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find the idea Capablanca found in this position, as it's just, it's just wonderful. While I have a nice sip of my water. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you are an excellent spotter of triangles. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, here Capablanca played rook captures on e3. Now, of course, you could capture the pawn on a2, create a pass pawn on a7, and then just push that pawn to victory, but that's a boring way to do it. Capablanca doesn't mind playing boring moves if it's winning. Capturing on a2 is completely winning. But the move Capablanca played, rook captures on e3, is just much faster, and it's just beautiful. And what a way to gain the 7th win in a row in this tournament. So what do you do here? Of course, you have to capture the rook, otherwise you're just, well, down a whole rook. So f captures on e3 was played, and now comes the move you had to find. There, the glitch on the interface already showed it to you, but queen to c4 is the idea. And then it connects rook to f1, and the queen from c4 defends the rook on f1, and there is no way for white to prevent this. It's just too powerful. Queen to c4 was played by Capablanca. The threat is rook to f1, winning the queen. So can you do something about this? You could try rook f5, just blocking the rook, but it doesn't work. Queen captures on e4 with check, will pick up the rook. So easy win for Capablanca. On the other hand, you could try king g2, just, control the f1 square twice with the queen and the king, but then queen to e2 check picks up the rook on h5. So again, you've done nothing here really. The only thing white had left to try, it's move 29. So of course Bernstein didn't want to resign just yet, allowing Capablanca to create a miniature. He played rook to g5. At least while rook to f1 comes, he will have some threats along the g7 file. Rook to f1, of course, was played by Capablanca. Rook to g7 check, we have king to f8, and now rook to g8 check. King to e7, we have rook to g7 check, king to e8, rook to g8 check, and now king to d7. We have rook to g7 check, and here Capablanca just tucked his king back to safety on the c6 square. There are no more checks anymore, and here white will just lose the queen. Rook to g4 was played, keeping an eye on the e4 pawn, but now just rook captures on g1. We have king captures on g1, and now finally queen captures on a2. You have to play something, but this is now the fastest way to win this game. White played h4, started to push his passed pawn, but here Capablanca just played queen captures on c2, with of course threats of queen d1 check, picking up the rook. So here we have rook to g3, getting the rook out of harm's way, and now just a5. And it was now finally in this position that American chess master Jacob Bernstein resigned the game. Black pawn is just much faster. Well, you can just continue pushing this pawn, but then black can just capture here. You can give up the queen for the pawn if you want, and your passed pawn will of course be much faster. So there's no point in continuing this game. But yeah, just a wonderful victory for Jose Raul Capablanca. 7th win in a row in this tournament. He's doing, wonderful work, and a beautiful victory. Just this rook captures on e3. Just a very powerful idea here, getting rid of this f pawn, opening up the f file, and creating this, not that, but this wonderful triangle. That's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Let's check out the photo one more time because it's just amazing. Such nice high quality photo from 1915, over 100 years ago, is just amazing. And look at them, Alaska deep in thought in the position, Capablanca just posing for the photo, also Jacob Bernstein posing even better, and Marshall also posing. You don't know who's a better poser here. But yeah, I do hope you enjoyed, and if you want to learn more about the photo, the first link in the description below will take you to the Chess History website where you can read about it. Once again, I do hope you enjoyed it and the photo. I promise I will return with the couch story. I would like to thank Torben Anderson, James Lewis, Brian Powell, Jack Neary, and Thomas Blake for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the Capablanca saga, checking up on your suggestions, and well, the Grenke is coming up, so we have that as well. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.